All right, so we'll shift gears a little bit here to tax increment financing. And even I have trouble explaining what that is sometimes. Just a Wikipedia definition very quickly. Tax increment financing, it's a way to use future gains in taxes to subsidize current improvements which are projected to create the conditions for said gains. Right, so I'll just mention the Buncher project in the Strip District, and of course the Almono project in Hazelwood. Those are two stories, TIF stories that have been in the news. But I had a couple of questions submitted along the lines of the fact that these TIFs are benefiting, they're an economic benefit to the developers to some degree, but not to the neighborhoods in which the developments are being built. So we'll probably make this a two-part question, but first of all, what would you do to modify the TIF legislation or the way it's used to ensure that more direct benefits accrue to the neighborhoods surrounding the developments? Start with Bill.
Tale of two TIFs, really. Almono and Buncher. Buncher didn't need it, didn't want it, but we were going to give it to them. Community never supported the project, but we were going to give them money, public money, to do it. The Almono site went through a 3 or 4 year community process. Community bought into it. It's a site that needs money to reclamate it. TIFs were created so that brownfields could compete against greenfields, so that it wasn't an incentive for developers to go and tear down trees in order to build a development, but so that they could take a site that needs reclamation in order to be able to rebuild in cities. We have abused that process and that tool like nothing I've seen. The fact is we should be focusing on how to rebuild the city with TIFs. And the way that we rebuild the city with TIFs is through housing, number one, in rebuilding in neighborhoods that haven't seen development, and also through new business startups. This region lags behind the rest of the country in new building and new business startups. We should be investing there, not in retail. Bob O'Connor had a great saying, retail follows rooftop. You build the housing, the retail will follow, and you don't have to use public money to build it.
Well, I'm going to mention two other TIFs that I think show exactly what the process is designed to do and the success that can be achieved because of it. And first is Bakery Square. The Walnut Capital folks are here. That's been a tremendous project. That was a TIF. It was a TIF that was used properly. And we talk about creating good startups and good companies. How about the fact that Google now has over 200 employees working in that building? Guess what, folks? If we didn't TIF that project, number one, doesn't happen. And number two, Google isn't here, not to mention all the successful jobs that have been created as a result of that TIF. That was a TIF that was done properly. It was done under my administration, and we're proud of. Secondly, PNC Downtown. Downtown is creating jobs and economic development and vibrancy like never before. Bill is the only one to oppose that on City Council. And he shakes his head yes, and I assume he's proud of that vote. Well, I'm proud of the vote that I took on City Council, because that project was the beginning of the Renaissance downtown, was the beginning of the creation of jobs, was the beginning of the success of future developments. And PNC now is building their second building, $400 million without any public financing. That's how TIFs are supposed to work, and in those cases, they did. And so our track record as far as TIFs are concerned is one that we're proud of. One that creates jobs and one that creates good economic development success stories.
Well, I guess I have a different opinion on the best way to use TIFs, because I think TIFs and other economic development tools should be used to benefit those neighborhoods that need it the most. And Hazelwood's one of those neighborhoods. You know, Hazelwood's fallen on some hard times, partly because of the Monfayette Expressway, which we still need to get a final resolution that they are not building that highway. Thank you. But once that's done and that site can move forward, that's a neighborhood. That's the kind of neighborhood we should be in. You know, when we talk about public funding, you know, the mayor of the city of Pittsburgh needs to recognize that funding's got to benefit everybody in the city of Pittsburgh. And we know too often some neighborhoods just don't get that kind of attention. Hazelwood is a neighborhood like that. You know, this is a neighborhood that, as mayor, I would support a TIF in that neighborhood. I would support other economic development tools in that neighborhood, because it's the kind of neighborhood that needs the help.
Let's just stick with this. Stick with Hazelwood. Stick with benefiting the neighborhood surrounding the development. You know, this Hazelwood TIF, they're asking for $80 to $90 million. That's the largest TIF in the history of the city. Is that amount of money required? Will we be able to guarantee access to the riverfront after giving them that much money? That was a sticking point. That continues to be a sticking point at the Buncher development. And again, how do we guarantee that the neighborhood of Hazelwood on the other side of 2nd Avenue benefits from the TIF?
Yes, we obviously our administration brought the TIF forward at the URA, and we are supportive of the TIF in Hazelwood. And you know, I want to clear up a misconception specifically about the Buncher site and the question about Hazelwood. The Buncher site in no way denied access to the riverfront. That's simply not true. It was not a gated community. There's a public street there where people could publicly park and literally within feet walk to the riverfront. That's a project that will, over the course of many years, be discussed in public. In no way, shape, or form were those drawings or designs final. And so the reality of the situation is, while people want to create ideas of their own or create misconceptions, that's just not true. I think the Hazelwood site also provides us a tremendous opportunity along our riverfronts. Pittsburgh is recognized, and for good reason, of the successful transformation along our riverfronts, and I think that both Hazelwood and the Buncher site create that opportunity for us to continue what's already been a great track record.
A couple clarifications as well. PNC Bank got a $30 million grant, then came back and said they needed an $18 million TIF on top of it. I voted for the $30 million grant, but it is a hard case to make to say that PNC doesn't have the money and they needed a TIF on top. And number two, I think that it may work in other parts of the city, but it isn't going to work in the East End. Bakery Square did not bring Google to Pittsburgh. Carnegie Mellon brought Google to Pittsburgh. And when Google's executives came in, there was only one elected official that they met with, and that was me. You know where I took them? Mardi Gras. Because that was a place that was Pittsburgh, and I had a fun time there. But the fact is that that was what brought Google here. Hazelwood has the opportunity to be fantastic, and that's one of the things about the transformation of this city. If done right, it can be something that we look at with great pride. But it needs a couple of things. Number one, the preservation of the Roundhouse and a couple of the other buildings so that we can look back with pride about what was there. Number two, connectivity. Until Hazelwood connects to Oakland, and there's the railroad that's right there, the Allegheny Valley Railroad, it's still going to be difficult to get to in order to have development come out. If we connect that railroad and it goes right to CMU's campus, then we can bring the next Googles, and there'll be International Harvester, there'll be John Deere, and they'll build robotics centers that will be down in an area that has land like Hazelwood. The East End is the only part of this city that has grown in the past 10 years, and we grew by 10%. We need to expand that to places like Hazelwood and Lawrenceville, and we can do that through rail.
As I said, Hazelwood has been held hostage. Hazelwood has been held hostage for the last 20 years because of this idiotic Monfayette Expressway coming through that neighborhood. Okay, what I suggested 8 years ago was that the Southern Expressway continue from the top of the Monfayette and towards its eastern leg to Monroeville to provide that access to the Mon Valley communities, but that piece that comes from the city just didn't make sense. And as a result, we've waited and waited and waited for the Pennsylvania Turnpike Commission to basically say, what we already know they're going to say is that they're not building that highway, but they haven't done it yet. And that's another role for the mayor of the city of Pittsburgh. We've got to be in Harrisburg talking to these organizations and advocating for the city and advocating for a neighborhood like Hazelwood. And when we finally do build something over in Hazelwood, we've got to build it in a way that enhances Hazelwood. We can't build the waterfront there. We can't build it like they did. Like they backed their self against Homestead, and it's harder to get there from Homestead than it is from Squirrel Hill. We can't do that to Hazelwood. Hazelwood has to be involved in that development. The RIDC has to make sure that that community has a lot of say about what happens down there. But more than anything, as we put public money into projects, we've got to begin putting public money into projects into the neighborhoods that need it the most. And that's one of them, and that's why I would support that project.